On September 20th, 1945, a 33-year-old German engineer stepped off a ship at a small military facility on the northern tip of Long Island in Boston Harbor. Fort Strong was the processing point for Project Paperclip, the government program that brought hundreds of German scientists into the United States after the fall of the Third Reich. The man filled out his paperwork that morning as the inventor of the Nazi V-2 rocket, a member of the National Socialist Party, and an SS officer who could be connected to the deaths of thousands of concentration camp prisoners who had built his weapon underground, in the dark, in conditions that left more of them dead than the rockets had killed on the other end. His name was Wernher von Braun. 24 years later, on July 16, 1969, he stood in the firing room at Kennedy Space Center in Florida and watched another of his rockets, the Saturn V, lift Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins into the sky toward the moon. This episode will not tell you what to do with both of those facts at once. It will tell you what happened. You will decide what it means. Wernher von Braun was born in 1912 into a Prussian aristocratic family in the province of Posen. His father was a government official and a baron. His mother was an amateur astronomer who gave him a telescope when he was confirmed in the Lutheran Church at age 13. He pointed it at the moon and did not stop thinking about it for the rest of his life. By his early teens, he had read the work of Hermann Oberth, a physicist who believed rockets could reach space, and had taught himself calculus and trigonometry to understand the physics. He joined the German Society for Space Travel at 16. He tested small liquid-fueled rockets in the fields outside Berlin. He was, from the very beginning, a man who wanted to go to space and was willing to find whoever would pay for the journey. In 1932, the German army came to him with an offer. They wanted to develop long-range artillery rockets. He wanted to develop spacecraft. They would fund his research if he developed their weapons first. He was 20 years old. He said yes. He received his doctorate from the University of Berlin in July of 1934, the year after Hitler came to power. By then, he was already at Peenemünde, a research facility on the Baltic coast, developing the missile that would become the V-2. In 1937, he was told to join the National Socialist Party. He did. In 1940, he was ordered to join the SS. He was given membership number 1-85068 and the rank of Untersturmführer, equivalent to second lieutenant. He later said he had joined because refusal would have ended his work. The historical record on that point is, depending on the historian, contested. The V-2, Vergeltungswaffe 2, Vengeance Weapon 2, was the first operational guided ballistic missile in human history. It flew faster than sound. It gave no warning before impact. It carried a 1-ton warhead. It was technically magnificent, and it was used to kill people. In August of 1943, the Royal Air Force bombed Peenemünde. Hitler decided to move V-2 production underground. The new plant was called the Mittelwerk. It was built inside a converted tunnel system near Nordhausen in central Germany. The labor came from the attached concentration camp, Mittelbau Dora. The prisoners at Dora worked 12-hour shifts in tunnels with no ventilation, no sanitation, and no beds in the early months. They slept on the cave floors in the dirt. The tunnels smelled of explosive propellant and human waste. The temperature was cold year-round. Typhus moved through the population. In the first winter, the death rate was so high that the SS brought in a crematorium. Later, there were public hangings. Prisoners accused of sabotage, hanged on the overhead cranes used to move rocket components, left visible as a warning to the others. Of the roughly 60,000 prisoners who passed through the Mittelbau Dora network, somewhere between 10 and 25,000 died. At least 10,000 of those deaths have been attributed specifically to the V-2 production program, more than twice the number of people killed by the missiles themselves. Werner von Braun visited the Mittelwerk approximately 12 to 15 times between late 1943 and February 1945. His visits were technical. He came to communicate design changes and inspect production quality. What he saw during those visits is a matter of testimony and historical dispute. One former prisoner who was transferred to work at the underground facility left a statement that has survived in the record. He said that von Braun and the German scientists who accompanied him walked the corridors regularly. He said they saw the conditions. He wrote, "Not one single time did Professor Werner von Braun protest against this cruelty during his frequent stays at Dora." Von Braun's own account, given to a West German court in 1969, was that he had seen terrible conditions in the underground facility. He said he had not seen dead bodies. He said he had been focused on the engineering. He was not indicted. In March of 1944, the Gestapo arrested von Braun. The charge was defeatism, drunken remarks at a party that Germany was likely to lose the war and that his real goal had always been to build a spaceship, not a weapon. He was held for 10 days. He was released through the intervention of his military supervisor and the armaments minister, who testified that he was indispensable to the V2 program. He went back to work. Between September 1944 and March 1945, approximately 3,000 V2 rockets were fired at London, Antwerp, and other Allied targets. At least 4,400 civilians and soldiers died in the impacts. In London, each rocket arrived without warning. Supersonic, no siren, no time to shelter. You heard the explosion, or you heard nothing at all. On the morning of May 2, 1945, von Braun's brother Magnus drove down a mountain road in Bavaria and found a group of American soldiers. He said his brother wanted to surrender. That afternoon, Werner von Braun was in American custody. He had already decided before the war's end that America was where he wanted to go. The Soviets were also looking for German rocket scientists, but von Braun had judged correctly that America was the country most likely to fund his dream of space travel. There was another option. He could have stayed and faced what had been done. He did not. The Soviets also took German rocket engineers, and those men spent years in that program. Von Braun and his group chose the West, and the West chose to have them. Project Paperclip brought more than 100 German scientists and engineers to the United States. The records of their Nazi affiliations were altered or buried. The program proceeded. Von Braun went first to Fort Bliss in Texas, then to the Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. In 1960, he joined NASA. He became director of the Marshall Space Flight Center. He became the chief architect of the Saturn V. The Saturn V was 363 feet tall. It stood 6 stories above the Statue of Liberty. It generated 7.5 million pounds of thrust at launch. It was, by any measurement, the most complex and powerful machine that human beings had built to that point. It flew all of its moon missions without losing a single crew. Von Braun watched Apollo 11 lift off from the firing room at Kennedy Space Center on July 16, 1969. He was 57 years old. The rocket his team had designed rose on a column of fire and climbed toward the moon. He reportedly said it was the greatest moment of his life. 6 weeks before that launch, he had testified at the West German consulate in New Orleans about the Dora concentration camp. He said he had seen terrible conditions. He said he had not seen dead bodies. He said he had been focused on the engineering. No indictment followed. He died of cancer in 1977 at age 65 and was buried in Alexandria, Virginia. His SS membership was not widely known in the United States until 7 years after his death, when Department of Justice investigators began reviewing the records that Project Paperclip had helped conceal. By the 1980s and 1990s, the full account had come out. The camp, the deaths, the visits, the testimony, the silence. This is the story of a man who wanted to go to the moon so badly that he was willing to work for any government that would let him build rockets. He worked for one that used enslaved people to build them, and he said nothing that changed the conditions of their dying. He went to the moon anyway, not himself, but through the machine he devoted his life to. The Saturn V never failed. 12 men walked on the surface of the moon because of what he built. That is also true. The history of the 20th century is full of questions like this one, and it has very few clean answers. The telescope his mother gave him was real. The people who died in the tunnels were real. Both things are true at the same time, and they do not cancel each other out. Neil Armstrong never spoke publicly, in any available record, about Wernher von Braun's Nazi past. He was asked, late in his life, about the people without whom the moon landing would not have been possible. He spoke about teams. He spoke about engineers and mathematicians and flight controllers. The silence in that particular context is its own kind of statement, though whether it is judgment or simply characteristic reticence is impossible to say from the outside. What you do with both things at once is yours to decide. The last quiet legend is still ahead. Subscribe. There is one more story left to tell.